Today we're going to talk about ABM, account-based marketing. What is it? What are the strategies? What are the implementations? And I thought that there would be no one better to discuss this with than Kirsty and Troy from Lead Forensics. So if you'd like to introduce yourselves, what is it that you do at the company? And we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Shall I go first?
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm Kirsty Dorr. I am involved in a lot of the marketing in Lead Forensics. So I'm currently acting as CMO, but I also head up one of our other brands, Webio, which is website personalization. And I'm involved with Troy on our marketing to our DSP's partner for our data product. So, Lead Forensics it's got so many different offerings for the data, right. And I'm very fortunate to almost be involved in most of them. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Fingers in many pies across the business.
Jack of all trades. So I am Troy Williams, and I lead the data partnerships at Lead Forensics. So in terms of my role, as Kirsty alluded towards, we're both quite heavily involved in our DSP, ABM and agency partnerships. Great. Working quite closely with them in order to, educate and enhance their current ABM strategies.
Amazing. Great. So saying that about ABM strategies before going to what Lead Forensics is in depth and everything. So could you describe for us what exactly ABM is?
Yeah, I'm like, God, I have worked in the ABM space for so many years, and obviously prior to being at Lead Forensics, ran a B2B marketing agency. So ABM is like in my blood, and I feel very passionate about ABM being done right. So for me, true ABM is like you identify these are our ICP accounts. These are, and I will define ideal customer profile because I know a few people ask what that means, but we have identified these ideal accounts that we want to work with because they, fit a great customer profile. We've got the ability to retain them, to grow them, to continue to work with them. And we need to create an end-to-end marketing campaign that allows us to engage, attract, nurture, and at some point, hopefully, convert those brands. It's just about smart marketing. If you think, back when I first started my career in B2B, you would segment everything. You would segment by industry. You would segment by decision maker. Of course, the messaging has to be as accurate as possible. ABM is just about creating an individual message for that brand, but there's a lot of work that needs to go in at the front end. And I think that's where I get frustrated with how people classify ABM, because it isn't a case of, right, we've identified the brand, let's go and run some campaigns to it. We'll blast out some activity on LinkedIn or digital display, whatever. It's like, right, now we get into the detail. Now we get sales involved. Now we get marketing involved. And we really start to map out that account. Like, what ins do we have already? Who are the key stakeholders? Who are the influencers within that business? Why do they think that? Why do we think that our product would be right for them? Like, what are the challenges that they have got, which will help us open the door and to be able to sell to them? And once you know all of that, then you can start looking at, right, how are we going to target those businesses? Like, what's the best way to do that? And obviously the individuals within those businesses too. But that's my view of true ABM, not going wide at industry level, but actually building a campaign for specific organizations.
Exactly, because what you explained, when a client comes to us wanting to run an ABM campaign, each one of them have a very different view of what that is and what exactly the purpose is. So again, to me at least, if you're targeting thousands of companies with your campaign, that is not ABM.
No.
Right? That is not ABM. That might be B2B, but it's not ABM. So when we are using perhaps a list of 50 or 100 companies max, right? That's, I would say, the only way that you can still target those companies, but be personal enough and have a customized approach to each one of those companies. So how does Lead Forensics enter this ecosystem of ABM? So what exactly, if I'm a client that just entered the B2B market and I find Lead Forensics, what would this company do for me?
Yeah. So from an advertising perspective,
I would say from an advertising perspective, and also for getting information on, for example, who's visiting my website, etc.
of course, of course. So, I mean, I think before you even start your ABM program, like if you have lead forensic software on your website and you've identified a group of organizations that are the right fit for you based on like key criteria, you should be able to identify businesses that are already showing intent by going onto your website and saying, right, okay, so these businesses, in fact, actually, I believe we ran a campaign for a client who did just that. So they had identified these are the businesses that are visiting our website. Right, great. They're already showing intent. They're already interested in our solutions. And now we want to target them to give them a more relevant message. So straight away, you've got intent. And then, you know, on top of that, then using our data to target those businesses who you know are right fit, but maybe aren't there yet and maybe aren't showing intent on the website. That's a great opportunity to drive them there and then identify further intent, because we all know, right, we've got like 50, we've got 100 organizations that we want to target. We want to spend our time on those organizations that we know are most likely to convert. And we want to, as marketers, we want to be able to provide information to sales to say, focus your energies here. So while sales might help us build that list, when we go out and we start advertising, we can use lead forensics data to target those brands in the right place at the right time, premium space, where they are going to be on a day-to-day basis as part of their business role, talk to them about the specific solution that the client offers, and then drive further interest and intent, either through engagement or driving them back to the website. But what I love about how our clients have used lead forensics so far is that they do segment it. So if you are doing ABM properly, again, you don't necessarily need to identify your accounts and have the same message for every single one. You can adjust your messaging and be smart with that too. So it is probably the one data source that you can use where you can be specific as possible because you're talking to an organization, but also maintain your accuracy in the data.
Of course.
I think in addition to that, lead forensics, where we sit within ABM, what we're able to do to support ABM, I think the majority of people and probably the majority of listeners will think of lead forensics as this identification platform, and we'll be able to identify anyone that comes to your, your digital assets or landing pages. What's really interesting and what, many listeners may not be aware of is that we don't just allow you to rely on the businesses that are coming to your assets. Like Kirsty said, we've got a way now where businesses can rely on an IP address to bring people into their ecosystem. So it's not just about, who it is that's coming to your campaign or coming through your ABM programs. It's about how do we bring those people into our ecosystem in the first place.
Right. And one of the things that is very important here, because it's not just knowing what companies are visiting your website, right? Is also the insights that you get from that. So knowing exactly which pages are they visiting, how much they spent in there, right? It's because if we see a company that is a potential client for us, that comes to our website and have visited, for example, footfall targeting for us, but they just spent 2 seconds, that also has great value to know exactly, they showed intent, they show interest in that product, but something happened that they didn't want to check it out more, right? So all of those insights that we're able to get through lead forensics, other than this, what other tools do we have that we bring value, not just knowing which company is visiting, but also what they're checking?
Yeah, I suppose there's, a few features, especially within the main sort of lead forensics platform that really sort of stand out and are really popular with our clients. Like obviously lead forensics is there to be used for identifying, the time of the visit or who it is that's visiting, but actually it's about understanding that level of engagement. Somebody that's visiting for 2 seconds might, as you quite rightly said, be just as valuable as a lead that's been there for 10 minutes exploring lots of content, because it allows you to optimize and readjust your focus. If we saw that the top accounts that we were really focused on as a business of targeting, we're not really showing a lot of engagement. Well, we know then to reavert our focus to, other accounts. So there's lots of ways that you can take value from those types of insights. But I think overall, lead forensics is probably the most granular in terms of the actual information and the insight that you get. We're not just talking about company level data with business name and website. We're talking the specific location of that visit. So we're not just talking, HQ of HSBC. We will tell you the exact branch of HSBC that actually visited, as well as obviously, like you said, the time of the visit, what it is that they're interested in. And then, of course, there is a feature within our main platform which will allow you to actually search the contact details of any of the decision makers that lie within that organization, allowing our customers to be able to engage with those leads at a really timely and efficient way.
Yeah, I love because I think in B2B, the sales process is not someone goes to a website, they buy the product and that's it done. They are like, they go visit, they come back again, they may have made an inquiry, they may have booked a demo, they may have spoken to sales. The trigger reports element of the software, I think, is really useful for sales to know that, because what they can then do is act on that in real time. So great, that business has just visited the website. I know that we've got an RFP out with them. I know that they've been looking at this. Right, it's a good time for me to reach out because they're in that evaluation mode. And the other way that we use the data, so that's, I suppose, like ABM once you're in, a sales process, being able to have those trigger reports. But Webio, our website personalization software, will allow you to, again, with those same businesses, personalize the experience for them. So obviously you can do that from first visit, and you can, serve relevant content, talk to them about what you know about them. But in an RFP situation or a sales cycle situation, you can actually serve an experience that is based on a conversation that you've had with them. And then that's really powerful because, we're all in competitive situations all the time. There's always 2 or 3 other vendors desperate for that opportunity. And something like Webio, doing that personalization could just give you the ability to gain an edge because you're reiterating back to them what you've understood and already know, but online, because they just, buyers, they don't pick up the phone to sales and ask the question. They'll go, right, okay, that was really useful. Right. Oh, I've got this question. I'll go onto the website. I'll go and see if I can find the information there, because I prefer to do that rather than pick up the phone and be sold to.
Absolutely.
So it is still the number one place where a buyer will go, before they make any decisions about reaching out. So having that intent is really powerful.
So one of the key aspects that I'm getting from this is that, of course, going back to the primordial essence of this, which is the data, right? The IPs to identify these companies. How does that work exactly? Because, of course, there's a lot of companies out there that are able to give you that domain to IP matching. But in terms of precision, we know that it's not the same one company and the other, right? So how is that done, and how is lead forensics different from the rest of the competitors?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a bit of an analogy for you that might help you and probably most of the listeners sort of understand the difference between, a very accurate, deterministically mapped IP data asset like lead forensics against, one of our potential competitors who maybe probabilistically mapped data. So the difference is, and probably the easiest way to explain it is, if I was driving into the office, the lead forensics office, and I drove up to the lead forensics office and I've parked in a lead forensics parking space, the car that I'm in is covered in lead forensics branding. I get out of the car and I've got a lead forensics badge. And when I get out of the car and head into the building, I'm going towards the door of the lead forensics office. That, to us, would scream enough sort of confidence.
Right.
It hit enough of a threshold, a confidence score for us to be able to say, yes, that is somebody that works for lead forensics, in which case tick. On the flip side of that, if I was driving up to the lead forensics office and I've driven up and I've not parked in a lead forensics car park, I've not got a badge on me, the car has absolutely no branding, and I've not gone in the direction of the lead forensics office, we would not categorize that as being a lead forensics individual. However, if you look at any other sort of IP2 business data providers, they will class that as the visit, and they'll take much less sort of corroborating factors before they do associate a business with an IP. We are extremely strict on the accuracy of our information, and it takes an awful lot to be able to pass that sort of threshold of our confidence score. And so we're really, really confident that the level of information that we're providing is far more accurate than what is typically available.
I think that's because the data and the premise the data was built on was to support sales.
Of course.
And, if you talk to our CEO, and when he had the original idea, it was always right. Oh my gosh, this data is like way hotter than any cold list you could ever have. These are people who are actively looking for your solution and you don't know who they are. We're selling that, and we've been selling it for, many, many years. We cannot afford for that to be inaccurate, because we would just create churn. Customers need to be able to rely on that data, and they use that effectively for their outreach. So first and foremost, the data was built with accuracy in mind because of how it's used. And then the advertising piece for us is almost a secondary. It's like, well, do you know what? If we're using it to tell you who's visiting the website, that data can be used in other places, but it's still got that same high level of accuracy in mind. And, as things change, we've incorporated automation, and we've still got a significant threshold that we go through. We still do a lot of manual verification of that data. Like, it's just, our reputation is built on great data for sales.
Yeah.
So we can't afford for it not to be accurate. And if it's used in website personalization as well, you can imagine, what would happen if that wasn't accurate. It just so happens that we're able to now work with our DSP partners to share that. But if they want confidence in the data and attribution, effective attribution, to be able to share with their clients and go, right, these businesses engaged, they showed intent, they can feel confident that they're doing that.
So one of the aspects that you mentioned that, of course, you started with this IP databases to identify which companies are visiting your website, and we already mentioned what value that has. However, in the advertising aspect of things, if we're using that data to target users and deliver ads on them, etc., we have a little bit of a problem if we're using this data to target users, but then our client is not using lead forensics, right? It is using perhaps a competitor or an alternative. What happens then in terms of matching?
Well, they wouldn't have it. There's a number of agency partners that we work with who are running ABM programs through lots of different channels, right? They've got lots of different channels in the mix. But that agency themselves will create a landing page for all of their marketing efforts for that client.
Right.
One thing that we found really useful for the lead forensics identification side, especially, is that, a lot of businesses, a lot of agencies, a lot of brands might not have the money, the budget for a huge sort of ABM platform in order to get that insight on their website. One thing that's worked really well for our agency partners is if they are doing that level of display targeting, they're using IP data or whatever to bring people into their ecosystem, well, we can provide a lead forensics code to be applied just to that landing page, so that you get insight on all of that marketing effort, all consolidated in one place, without actually having the six-figure fee of a full website or tracking system.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that happens to us with our clients when they come to us at ASTRAD and they want to run an ABM campaign. One of the first things that they're surprised is that it's extremely easy to create this campaign, and we have not the minimums that all of these big companies have, right? So it's kind of limiting the access of these perhaps smaller companies. I'm not saying that they make less than $1 million a year, right, in revenue, but it feels like in order to access these ABM tools for targeting, etc., you have to have a massive budget in place in order to
That's
run
the
these
assumption,
campaigns.
though.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's not true.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. Yeah, I agree with that. It's like the minute you start talking about digital display, oh no, you need big budgets to do that. Well, you don't. You need an effective budget, and you need to assign a good quality budget to it, but you don't need to go crazy. And, you know, a lot of the agencies that we talk to who are excellent at ABM, and, you know, the pieces that underpin really good quality ABM, they're doing the account-based research. They've created great campaigns directly targeted to those businesses. Don't think about digital display because they just think, oh, that's not going to work, or I can't target at business level. I'll just have to go really wide. I'll create loads of wastage. But, you know, this is why this solution is great to add into the mix.
Because, again, we know that a smaller campaign, perhaps if we're running a campaign that's $2,000, $3,000 per month, might not have a massive effect. However, I think it also depends on the account that you're targeting, the geos that you're targeting, and what kind of attribution you're going to have, right, in order to assess the impact. It's not the same if you're running a campaign that just has click-through attribution, and you're going to see what's going to happen, or one that has view-through attribution with a properly big window to run. Of course, at ASTRAD, we run tons of different campaigns, performance, app installs, you name it. But for this, I do think that you need to have a proper, big enough view attribution window, because it's what we said. I receive an ad for B2B, for whatever service. Let's say it's an accounting service for companies. I'm not going to click on the ad. I'm not going to go in there and immediately put an inquiry in. That's not going to happen.
That's not how people buy anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, especially in B2B. If that's something that happens in B2C, imagine in B2B, right? So it's something that I have to mull over. I have to check the website. It was what you were saying before, Kirsty. You have to go in there, check things yourself. You're not going to send an inquiry. You're going to first inform yourself, and then you're going to send an inquiry. And it's important that we're able to do that attribution. Otherwise, lower budget campaigns is losing that value, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I completely agree with you. It's not like it's about measuring everyone, you know, as we're forced a bit like into last click attribution as marketers because we just see what got them in. And actually so many times, if I think about our own marketing, we'll go, oh yeah, they came through the website. Did they?
Yeah.
The website exists, but something is driven there, and we've got so much evidence to show that our content and our advertising that we put out has a huge halo effect. We can't attribute an exact piece of content to a lead, but we can see the journey and how that prospect engaged, and that happens for a long time. So, you know, it could be that inquiry comes in 6 months later from a campaign that started, but that's the B2B sales cycle. Like, we can't place an ad and get buyers to come into the market. Like that's not how it happens. Yeah. We just have to be there for them. And when they're ready, they'll convert.
And that's the thing, isn't it? You know, brands, B2B buyers very, very rarely do any research when they're in the market for what they need. They just remember the brands that they trust and that are familiar to them. And I think that that's important. You know, if you were going into a shop and you were looking to get, I don't know, a drink, and you know, 9 times out of 10, you already know that you want a can of Coke before you even get to the fridge. Yeah. And it's about that. It's about making sure that you're being front of mind and you're always familiar to them, so that when they do enter the market, they're coming to the website. And that, to me, is still attributed back to that brand awareness piece and being seen by them, even though they never converted on that immediate ad.
Yeah. That's the trigger for the research, isn't it? Because they will, and they'll do all of the other research outside of your website, reading loads of content about you before they come. But having that awareness and being there and providing them with really good, valuable content to drive them into the funnel through the advertising doesn't just always have to be about book a demo or make an inquiry. They have that recognition that, okay, I want to include these guys in my research mix now. I'm going to look further.
Of course. And what we said about knowing exactly what each one of these companies are doing, when they're doing it, and being able to map everything, right, on the external events that are happening. So as an example, there's this company that we were discussing that we knew that you guys talked to this company, and after that happened, we could see on our website how that company started researching almost every day,
Yeah.
right? We know, oh,
Brilliant.
they're checking this, they're checking that. We knew exactly what was going on. And that is not only on the display part of things and retargeting the company as well, but also prepares you on knowing what exactly that company wants.
Yeah.
So I would say that display and retargeting those users is just a small part of the bigger machine that's running from B2B and ABM, right? And in our experience, every time that we have a client coming through, I believe, let's see what you think about this, but I believe that education is a very important piece in here, because we're missing that part. We see clients that we talk to them and say, oh, you know what? We can target specific companies and you can see what they're doing on your website. And they go, really? We can do that? So yeah, you can. And they're kind of surprised and maybe even skeptical, let's say, that can be done. So I think that education part and that reassurance on where the data is coming from, how it's being collected, and how can you be sure that they're not just wasting money. They seem to be very confident when targeting entire verticals of companies. But when it comes to specific companies, they go like, it's too good to be true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we use that all day, every day. So I think knowing and identifying and having that like 98% confidence level that it's that business, like that's a given. I think what you said about organizations needing education, I think it depends on the sector that they sit in. If I think about our like technology clients and SaaS, like they're almost too far the other way. Like they're like, we want to see every minute detail of what that individual is doing, and they go too far. So I see our product as providing that perfect solution to, right, you have confidence that you're talking to that organization. Like, don't go any more granular than that to start with, because then your budget is being well spent and you're going to have good attribution and be able to say to your board or to the team, right, okay, so we decided that we were going to work with or identify these businesses for an ABM campaign. This is part of what we did and this is how they engaged. So even if they're not converted yet, you've got evidence that they have acted as a result. And in B2B, I think the business is where you really need to create that halo effect and talk to as many of the individuals within that business as possible, especially for something like a product launch, or you're talking about something new in the space. Like, identify the ones who it's going to be right for and just go for it. Yeah,
exactly. And from our perspective, when we're running all of these campaigns, and again, we're always talking about having lists of less than 100 accounts, right? Because again, one of the things that we're able to build from our end, and that's using your data, is that we're able to personalize each one of the ads that we're delivering towards the exact company and the messaging that we have in there, right?
Because that's ABM utopia, right? Yeah.
It is ABM utopia, but from our perspective, it's something pretty simple to do. Automating that, but it's something that without the database that Lead Forensics provides us, it would be impossible to do. But having that empowerment, let's say, allows us to do this in a very simple way with the tools that we already have. And we can see actively how that increases CTRs and how that increases visits towards the website, because you get attention, right? It's like when someone mentions your name, you immediately get your attention.
Of course,
right? So if you're seeing an ad, a video, or an animated banner, and you see that it's mentioning your company, you immediately get that. And that doesn't really cost you a ton of money more to do that, right? Since it's all automated. And 100% that's part of the strategies that we are implementing with Lead Forensics data at the moment. We have a client that actually, going back to the skepticism on this, that they did not believe. They said, there ain't no way that this can be done. And like you said, technology and SaaS companies know about this, but the B2B industry is so much bigger than that.
More than that.
Yeah, so much more. And they said, there ain't no way that this is the case. So I've got a friend that works at this company. It wasn't a massive company. It was maybe like 200 employees, something like that. And they said, I got a friend, so I want you to target that company in particular. We said, I don't know if that's going to work. Because just one account.
Yeah.
It's not massive, but let's give it a try. Let's try with just open, no whitelist and nothing. Let's just try targeting it. And it did take a while, just a little while, but after 2-3 days, they got the ad and said, okay, I'm sold. I'm happy with
Yes.
this.
Good.
I'm happy with this.
Yeah.
And again, it's that education of each one of these clients that are outside of the tech industry where they all know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's a lot of untapped potential that's not being used, that these companies could integrate within their sales cycles. Because I was reading this morning coming here that people think that when you're running LinkedIn ads, just by vertical, not even by company or account, when you're running that, you think that in 90 days, the sales is going to be done. But it's actually taking more like 300 days
Yes.
to complete the whole process. So that's the other thing of wanting that immediate conversion, or that immediate result from this. It doesn't work that way. It simply doesn't work that way. So in your experience with all the data that you have collected, how does that affect on clients' business and websites? And perhaps you have any example of one of your clients that has seen that through a long period of time of a company when they first reached it out and when they closed the actual deal.
Yeah, I can give example. I was thinking back to the customer video that we shared last week, which is I'm gonna talk about this one because it's a more traditional industry. They manufacture forklift trucks, and so they are in a traditional space because a lot of their sales process is done like face-to-face meetings where they'll go on site, they'll visit the clients that they work for, and what they said in the customer video, which we actually posted on LinkedIn last week, is that every week there's 1 or 2 opportunities that we didn't know we had. And a lot of those are either with potential customers who they may be engaged with a long, long time ago. They've done some advertising to them. They've been part of events is a key one. They've done an event and they've seen them at an event. And then all of a sudden they're there. And then the sales guy will go, I'm just going to say I'm in the area. And then they'll go, I was in the area. And this particular client has said, we have probably got 1 opportunity extra every single week by having that insight. And we wouldn't know, we wouldn't have a clue. And I think it also helps with existing customer data as well. Like, you know, the customer sales cycle isn't, okay, I buy and then that's it. It's like I continue to buy, I grow my business, and it's seeing the behaviors that are showing that might happen is really important. I mean, if I think about an example ourselves in lead forensics, you know, we'll see buyers driven to our website through content, and you know, we are a very demand gen focused business, so we'll jump on the live chat, we'll start a conversation with them, but it doesn't always happen straight away. I would say it can be as much as like 4 months from like initial visit to actually getting that lead coming through. But what's really important to us is that we don't go from like 0 to hero. Here's a great piece of content, have a demo. It's like, what is in the middle, and to keep driving them back. And that's where like the display activity plays a really fantastic part, because your ABM then is continuous, but it's like every time they come back, you add value. You're not trying to sell to them. It's like, okay, how can we just continue to add value? Then when they're ready, they're going to convert.
Exactly. Because there's, like you said, there's lots of times, and using ASTRAD as an example, because of course we're B2B as well, where we have clients that are interested in a product, but they will not convert immediately, right?
No.
Generally for us, of course, the ideal world, someone's, we need to run this campaign, it has to start tomorrow. Yeah, well, that doesn't happen. I wish it did, but it doesn't happen. And it's exactly those times where you first start the conversation and they say, well, we'll see in 4 months from now okay, you're not just going to leave it 4 months and that's it. You want to continue nurturing that lead, right? You want to continue targeting, but you don't want to bombard them with emails.
No.
And that's part of what we're saying of display ads, video ads, to target these accounts to continue keeping their value within your pocket.
Yeah. And you know what, in B2B as well, most of us now have an ICP and a list of organizations that we want to work with, and it is not endless. So we can't afford to create what we call scorched earth. Like we can't afford to get loads of unsubscribes and annoy these people by handing them. We need to look after them. And the other reason why we need to look after them is because they change jobs often. So if we annoy them in one company, we're going to annoy them in that is continuous. It's that the individuals and those buyers that are really important, and they will remember us if we help them. If we hand them, they won't.
Right.
No.
I think that's what
Or
it's
for the
about.
wrong reasons, they'll remember us. Yeah.
I think that's what it's about. Like, you can be so clever about what messaging and how you target those individuals. You know, we are all so used to opening up our inbox, whether it be on LinkedIn, email, wherever, and we all get hounded by so much content. Whereas if you're seeing a really clever ad, and it's really timely because they are a perfect ICP for you, they will see value in what it is that you're offering. I think that it just carries way more weight, and actually it's far more enticing, I think, to the viewer than an email or a message out of the blue.
Yeah, I agree. And that's exactly what you were explaining, that when you get that email, those constant messages, I don't know about you guys, but I get sometimes someone that has followed up 9 times on an email chain. I'm like, I'm not going to buy your product. It's not going to happen. But if I get a clever video, a clever ad that is directed to me, that's a whole different world, because it doesn't feel as insistent and attacking. It's like, here's my product, here's what we're offering. If you like it, if not, you can just pass. You're not going to offend anyone, right? But that constant bombarding, it's definitely way more negative than anything else you're going to do, right? And as we were discussing before starting the chat here, one of the things that must happen to you guys and happens to us for sure is I said, yeah, we want to target these companies, but we wanted to target just the CTO of each company. Well, what do you guys think about this?
Oh, do you know, like, as a marketer, like, I totally get why somebody would want to do that, because of course we're all told, make your messaging as granular as possible, talk to the decision maker, talk to the right organizations. But actually, from a lot of the conversations that we've had with you guys, we've recognized the fact, and we're educating our agency partners and our client partners that it's not effective. Like, just with the data that exists and the limitations around that, and also to the point we talked about earlier, like how many times, like, you could get into bombardment if you just want to target individuals, and a business has a buying unit. So our advice always is, for accuracy, target the whole buying unit, because then you're really confident that you have actually spoken to the right people within that organization. If you go organization and CTO, you could miss them. Like, so you're almost, by applying such a level of detail, you create more inaccuracy. And so that absolutely can play a part. But we say, when you started to see some intent and some buying signals, then you can start to add in other types of data to supplement your activity, but go wider first. Identify who's actually in the market, because, okay, today your CTO of your fintech company, sees your ad 20 times or how many times he has to see it to use your budget, and he's not interested. Budget's gone. Also, it makes it really difficult from an attribution perspective, because when you overlay the individual targeting, you don't see as much of the organization insight that you want to see. And you really want to start off with getting the analysis that you can share, like this, when we talk to agencies, that you can share with your clients to say, these businesses are the ones we are engaged with. You're not going to be able to say, we engaged with the CTO of this business, because that's personal data. Like, you can't do that. So I get why. And for everything that we talk to the agencies about, the agencies do try and tell the clients, you can't do that. Or not, you can't do that, but our advice would be not to do that to start with. but it's the clients who are driving it. And they're the ones who need to be educated. And I think it's, you know, if there's two flip sides, isn't there? There's your client who says, oh, I don't even believe that's possible to target the business. And then there's like your SaaS growth marketer who's like, I want to be able to do this. And, you know, fine, I'm sure you do, but do you really want to waste your budget? And so we're just all about educating. We're not, like, you're agnostic. Like, you're always going to advise your clients on what to do that's going to deliver the best result for them. We don't have any control over what our agencies and our clients do, but what we want to do is be able to help them make the right decisions for their budget and not feel disappointed. Because you could also make a decision about the digital display activity and decide it doesn't work because you have gone too granular. Whereas, you know, the most successful campaigns, from what we're seeing, they go wide, then they start to go deep.
And they do still, you know, there are other ways that they can get really clever about refining that targeting. So you're not just targeting the individual, but obviously with ASTRAD, you can geolocate. So actually, you're not just targeting that whole account. You know, the HSBC example that I gave earlier, you might want to target HSBC and your buying unit might be spread across various locations, but not all. Well, how about we, you know, narrow it down to just the locations where those people are definitely situated, but you know then that your messaging is being seen by, you know, buyers, influencers, end users,
like
all
your
of the people that are involved.
Like
Absolutely.
location, if you want to target C-suite and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. So it's exactly that when, again, clients come to us and they're not as educated as they could be, that's one of the things that we offer, right? So saying, okay, we have this data for the entire world of this company using HSBC again, but we just want to target their headquarters in Canary Wharf or City of London. We just want to make sure that we deliver the ads here. We don't want to deliver anywhere else because that's where we know it's going to have the highest value. But it's not just that. It's okay, we target these accounts and it's in this city, but you don't want your ad to be seen anywhere, right? It's what is the value proposition if your ad is going to be seen while the user's playing a game or whatever, right? So that's also the different tiers of targeting that you're going to do. The value of the CPM when you are targeting one of these users while they're visiting the Daily Mail or Express or The Economist is not the same as if they are just checking their GPS app, right? So having that kind of tiered approach to each one of those accounts is also going to help because you don't want to miss opportunities, but you want to make sure that you prioritize high value publishers. And of course, high value devices, not the same as delivering on a desktop than on mobile. But going back to what we were saying before of wanted to target the CTO, wanted to target like the C-suite of the company, generally that kind of matching you will only be able to do in mobile, right? So it still wouldn't make sense to me, right?
Not from a B2B perspective,
and not from a click attribution perspective, because no one like on a C-level is going to see an ad on their phone and go, oh yes, I'm going to click on this.
Any clicks are because your thumb has slipped. If we see clicks on mobile, it's an accident. And they're often the dwell time would be milliseconds because they've done it by mistake a lot of the time, you know.
Yeah. And that's knowing what they've done once they click, right? And once they've landed and say, oh, they landed, but they left the page within 1 second, you go, maybe this is not the best strategy.
Well, yeah, I mean, because what is their experience going to be as well when they click through on that ad? You want to pay for a quality interaction, and that quality interaction is much more likely to happen when they're at work and they're on a desktop, not, you know, on a train or like, you know, flicking through their whatever it is, social media, playing a game or whatever like that. They're not, their attention is on their attention span for your solution is just not going to be there. They might. So again, from an attribution perspective, like that is really problematic because it could help to create awareness. We talk about it in Webio a lot. Like it can create awareness, it could create a halo effect, but you're never ever going to be able to measure that,
right?
Because the engagement isn't going to be there.
Exactly.
So you know, and they would not convert. So they're not going to engage. So it's going to be difficult to measure. And then, you know, they're not going to be in the headspace to give your solution the attention that you would like it to be given. So be there when you've got that good quality time with them.
course.
Yeah.
And using practical examples for this, we're running a campaign for a bank institution for ABM, right? And essentially, they did want us to target, mobile and desktop. So, okay, well, you're the client. We don't recommend that. We recommend that if you're going to do that, do a lower CPM because the value will be lower. But at the end of the day, I think that about 80% of the delivery was done on mobile. Of course, it's way more prevalent in terms of traffic, and 20% was done on desktop. But half of the clicks came from desktop and not mobile, right? And knowing that mobile, especially in-app mobile, is way higher, right, in terms of CTR, it showed that the value of those clicks was incredibly higher. And yeah, at the end of the day, the client said, yeah, let's stop mobile. Makes no sense to continue pushing here. Let's push the rest of the budget towards desktop because, yeah, the clicks might not be cheap. And by cheap, I mean maybe $5, $6, whatever it is. But you know that has that super high value and super high CTR. And in the end, the users land to your page and they are visiting the rest of the website, which is, again, in an ideal world, what you want them to do. They're not going to convert at the moment.
No.
But they are spending time in your site, which is what's going to give you value and give you insights of what they want. To me,
you start to build intent. Like you start to
Exactly.
build your own good quality first party data. You can't do that from mobile.
it's almost, at least to me, like cheating when you know that, oh, look, what does the client want? He wants this, he wants this, he wants this. So I can be ready before going after them, before retargeting them or reaching out, and I know exactly what they want. As a company, if someone comes to me telling me exactly what I want and what I'm looking for, that's going to grab my attention.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and a great way to achieve standout. And I suppose as a B2B marketer, that's one of the areas. We don't have many edges across our B2C colleagues, but that is one area that we really can do that, and we can be prepared for that interaction. Obviously, the interactions are, much more high value. We have higher order values, and so it makes sense to do that. But we can get that level of insight from that visit. So yeah, very powerful.
And one of the concerns I would say with clients when they want to use that B2B data that we have openly available in our platform using your technology from Lead Forensics, one of the things is that their concern is about the collection of the data and data privacy, right? Of course, being in Europe, GDPR, California, and the US, how do you guys deal with that? Do you get asked the question a lot, or is it something that is not so much of a concern?
Yeah, no, it is asked a lot, and for that reason, we are really, really transparent with how we collect that data, and we've been transparent with the ICO on that, so that IP data is not classed as personal data, and the ICO have confirmed that, so we can ingest that data and do it in a way that is completely compliant. And with the confirmation from the ICO that the way we do that is not in any way identifying individuals and compromising any individual data is really powerful in conversations. So we'll very often use that in like when we're talking to potential prospects, new customers, the legal team, we have our head of data compliance, Michelle, has spent years and years on this, and to get, in writing from the ICO that the way that we obtain our data is compliant and not, not classing it as personal data is just really powerful. So, and I think that was important for us to do that, because so much of what we do is in the UK and Europe. Obviously, North America is huge for us. Regulations are not as strict there. But our business is based in the UK. Our EU data is still really, really good. So compliance is everything.
And I think most of that, when people have those concerns and it's, about data collection and privacy and how do you do what you do, is because they are skeptical about it actually being possible.
Yep.
And I think it's more so around it being intrusive. People are a bit scared about having data that it has been captured, from just a visit from a website. But ultimately, it's all down to legitimate interest. If somebody's coming to your website, they're there with a business need, and it's no different to having, you know, a storefront. If 100 people came into your shop, but only 2 out of those 100 came up to the till, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going up to the other 98 people and I'm going to ask, you know, what is it that I can help with? And it's about engaging with those 98% of people that are anonymous. And there, you know, you are right to be, you know, brands and B2B marketers are right to be skeptical, but it's all under legitimate interest. It is all very compliant. Obviously, we're a EU operating business, and we have been for, you know, 14, 15 years. And
so taking on that, and definitely, I believe that one of the main, I'm not going to say issue, but one of the main things that could be done better is that education piece, right? And having these companies having zero problems burning $10,000 per month in Google Ads. So yeah, it's completely fine. You know, we're just going to burn $10,000. And then you go, well, we can do $1,000 campaign targeting precise ABM data on users that are showing intent on your website. You know, how can we know that the data is correct? So that's why I'm saying that 100% there's way more that can be done and explored for all of these businesses, and that untapped potential that in order to educate them, in order to see the value that they can get from that. And like I was saying before, for these businesses that are not as experts as tech and SaaS businesses, it feels too good to be true. It does feel too good to be true. And until they see it, that they have actually deliberate ads in there, they don't believe it. And the other thing is that, surprisingly, I haven't seen that many businesses using this kind of tools like lead forensics to identify what visitors are checking their website. For some reason, I think that they don't even know that that exists. And one of the other things that I believe that in the B2B and ABM sectors is finding that there's too much noise. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of, I'm not going to say, I'm going to say it, fake data. That's going around, and the actual valuable propositions are not being heard enough, let's say.
Yeah, I think it is all around the accuracy of the information, isn't it? You know, we are not the only, you know, sales intelligence tool. And we're not naive to the fact that, you know, we're in quite a, you know, a busy market. But it is all down to the accuracy of the information. You know, what stands out about the lead forensics IP data is the accuracy of that information. And being absolutely sure that those are the businesses that not only you're identifying, but you're actually looking to reach. So yeah, having confidence in our data asset is really powerful.
So one of the things that I'm seeing now, it's pretty surprising. I think it has accelerated in the last couple of years. You will know this. There's a lot of businesses for B2B identification coming through, a ton of them. Like they're popping like mushrooms all over the place. But the way that they're collecting the data has nothing to do on how you guys are doing it. Because, of course, before we had to research a lot on who we were going to choose to be our primary partner for this. And we did detect that the accuracy of the data and the way that the data was provided, right, it had nothing to do one with the other. So generally, I think that these businesses are doing it based on IP ranges. DNS
lookup.
Exactly.
Lots of different publicly available, you know, sources. I think the main difference is that when you're a business and you're building this IP data asset off of DNS lookup and publicly available information, you are going to have a significant amount of inaccuracies. They have not got, you know, I don't know any of these sales intelligence tools or any of our competitors actually that have, you know, 150 manual verifiers in their head office in the UK who spend, you know, their full time, 40 hours a week, pulling out that data, manually verifying it, stripping out bits, manually verifying before, you know, pushing it back into the ecosystem. So I think that, yeah, the accuracy of our information is second to none. Lead forensics is probably the most accurate, I'd say probably, it is the most accurate IP data vendor globally.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think from a compliance perspective, you know, there are lots of what I would class as like Emperor's New Clothes type solutions where they'll tell you that they can identify the visitor and the individual. I don't think that that they give those businesses longevity.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think from a compliance perspective, they are probably riding the crest of a wave and it's going to come crashing
Right.
down. So we've always been of the mindset of like, we are confident that the way that we obtain and use our data is compliant. Obviously, it's accurate, but we could have gone down that route. We could have started sourcing and adding lots and lots of other data sources, scraping data from elsewhere. But it would, yes, it might help us in the short term and we might get a big boost, but it would hurt us in the long term, both from a retention perspective, because at some point those solutions aren't going to be available. So all the customers who have like signed up to them are going to be like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And a reputational perspective as well.
For sure. So a couple of examples here using this. There's this client that we weren't going to target just one company, right? Not very scalable, not very business friendly in terms of making money for us, but we had to do it. And they insisted that we used their data, and they did exactly that. They used a DNS lookup, they got the ranges, and they started targeting the company. And we did a proposition. We always try to get as much value of these tests. And we said, you know what? Let us do something. Let us get our data that we have with Lead Forensics and let's target the same company, right? And two things happened. The first one, the engagement from using Lead Forensics IPs was way better in terms of CTR. We could see that. But also the interesting part is that from their perspective on the landing page that they had, they were not using Lead Forensics tools for this. A lot of the IPs that were identified as that company from Lead Forensics did not show up on their tool.
Wow,
It
okay.
wasn't showing up on their tool. So, of course, that is also a part of the missed potential of what you're getting. Because we had the database of their landing page, and we could see what sites we're visiting in there because we had the discrepancy. And we said, actually, these IPs are from this company, and you're not identifying them at all in that way.
Yeah. What's interesting as well, something that a lot of the agencies that we meet with have been running this past some of their clients. A lot of our clients will want to use their own first-party data or source something to be able to use themselves, much like this example of this client. And what would be really interesting, and what's been really interesting and eye-opening for some of our agency partners, is provide them with a Lead Forensics tracking code. Let them target, whichever method through whichever channels it is that they like, but then use a Lead Forensics tracking code on the landing page or the website where that marketing data is funneling through to, because I can pretty much guarantee that the businesses that you thought you were targeting, whether it be on cookie, behavior, intent, whatever, isn't the business that is being identified. We know that the accuracy level of our information, and so when businesses use the IP address of Lead Forensics account level data, the attribution is going to be that business.
Absolutely.
And so there's two ways really that you could sort of look at it. It's, okay, we'll continue with your existing targeting methods, but maybe just get a little bit more insight and a little bit more reassurance that those businesses are the ones that are coming through through to your website. And it more often than not, they'll then shift from their existing method to Lead Forensics IP because they know then that they are actually reaching the right accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's going back to understanding the value of the data that you're using, right? Because for us, the way that the model works, of course, when they select ABM data, they have to pay an extra CPM cost. And I understand from their perspective, they go, oh, that's an extra. That's, we're going to use our first-party data that we just pulled from somewhere else, from this free lookup tools over there. And I understand it, but what is the point then? It's like I want to bake a cake, but I'm just going to use very poor ingredients, right? So what's the point of baking it if you're not going to be able to actually consume it, right?
Yeah.
So that's again, going back to that educational piece for these teams to understand both marketing and sales in order to align themselves and use this valuable data to basically empower their processes. It's not, let's say, a way of burning money, or it's not a way of just throwing money in there, but knowing what they're targeting and that attribution of knowing how afterwards maybe 2 weeks from then or 4 weeks from then,
Mhm.
the user is still visiting the site,
Yeah.
and we know that that's a user that was impacted from display campaigns and is visiting continually the site, right?
Yeah.
And they can then know who to target and who to go after.
Mm.
And some tools out there that we have explored, that we have seen, actually tell you who is the person visiting the site. What do you think about this? Because we are skeptical. We don't think that that is correct. And we believe that it's quite inaccurate.
Yeah, well, this is a bit of a topic actually that Kirsty and I have discussed a few times because, like I said, we're meeting with all of these agencies. We're running some really exciting lunch and learn sessions where we're able to educate these brands and these agencies on exactly why they should be using lead forensics account level targeting over, what's potentially possible with user level targeting, one-on-one display. We have tested, we've looked into things like this, and we have been tested against the individual, what would you call it? I suppose the user targeting, let's say. And we proved it incorrect. We've got various offices. So Lead Forensics is obviously, operating in the UK, North America, and one of our North American offices, some of the guys in one of those offices had visited a website of an agency that we were very closely working with who had one of these tags on their website. Won't say the brand name because there's obviously a few of them. Yeah. That visit, not only did it identify the wrong individual, it identified the wrong business, and that wrong business was over the road or within the same serviced office. But because they were on their own IP, within every Lead Forensics office is on their own IP, we know that was possible to identify that individual or that business, especially given the IP. But to identify the wrong account and the wrong individual altogether just isn't great. And for that agency that had that tag on that website, the conversation very quickly changed with that vendor because they were proven incorrect. And actually, when you are an agency or you're a brand and being accountable to that information and obviously feeding it through to a sales team or wherever that information is being fed through to, it needs to be correct. And if you're going to put crap in the top of the funnel, you're going to get crap out the bottom, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's like, I guess the reason that people want to identify an individual is because they want to target that individual, right? So if they're wrong, that's creating the worst possible experience. Like, it would be better to have absolute confidence that that business is regularly showing intent, and then do put a bit of work in to find the right person. And in our tool, what we'll do is we'll say, right, okay, like what kind of decision makers do you want? Like for example, your solution, you might sell it to sales, right? Okay, here's all the relevant sales decision makers, and then you can start to, because it is a buying unit anyway. Yeah. Like, so yeah, I think if you're going to go that accurate, but it's based on probability, it could create a terrible experience, which is not a good idea.
Anything that has to do with that personally identifiable information, I'm always shying away from that, because of course we use intent signals tools in order to help our clients target new businesses, perhaps not only by vertical, revenue, location, etc. And some of these tools offer personal information saying it's not only this company that's looking for this service, it's this person.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting, it's like that's something that it's pretty nice. And I've got a friend that works at a pretty big bank here in London, and one of their colleagues was showing in there, right? One of the departments is showing, and then the exact colleague. And out of curiosity, I said, you know what? Can you ask him if he's actually actively looking for that? And of course, the response was no. Like, this department might be, but I'm not looking into that, right? So I understand how interesting and how valuable that can be. It can look for businesses that want to sell. But again, not only because we're moving towards a more privacy protected world, which I think that's positive, that's good. And what we said, that the IP information is not personally identifiable information, so that's good. But it's also what we said, if we're going to build this campaign around data that's not precise, it's not accurate, don't do it.
No,
Simply,
it's just
it's better not to,
wasted.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's better not to run it. So we talked about several topics in terms of the struggles in the ABM industry. Do you think that there are other things that perhaps are being pain points in the industry that we haven't discussed?
I think like ABM is absolutely an aligned sales and marketing play, and sales and marketing alignment is always a problem. So I do think that when we are embarking on an ABM program, getting everybody bought into it, like, and if I think about lead forensics as well, like it's quite often the marketer who has the budget and they run the website, but it's the salesperson who will actually use the data. Alignment is really important because that's when you're going to get the best results from your ABM campaign. So sales have got amazing insight because they talk to prospects every single day. They can feed that in. Marketing can then use that to create magic with their campaigns, but only if they've got good data and they've done good research. And then vice versa, once marketing have collected that intent data, sales have to commit to putting the effort in to, none of it's easy, right? It's not easy, but if it was easy, everyone would do it and everyone would, but it's like, you've got to take it seriously. And I don't think it needs to be a whole complete business process overhaul, but it absolutely does need both teams working together, which is often a struggle because I talked to one of my colleagues who actually runs another data business, but more like a data provider, not IP data, and she talks about all bound. And I think what you have to do is agree, right, this is a joint venture between the two of us. These are not sales leads. These are not marketing leads. It's an opportunity for us to create a really great experience for these really valuable customers. And together, we will take the success or the failure. And so I think that's probably the elephant in the room that still remains is that ABM is not a pure marketing play. To be successful, you have to have sales involved as well at beginning, middle and end to really deliver.
And that's one of the things that we see, that when we're talking to new prospects that are interested in everything, every time it's either we're talking to the salespeople or to the marketing people. And every time is the same. We're talking to salespeople, well, this is a marketing budget, so we have to discuss with them. The marketing doesn't understand what this is. Or if you're talking to someone from marketing, they go, well, sales data, so let me talk to them. So I agree that being able to make that bridge as easy as possible is, at least for us, what we're seeing, one of the main struggles in order to make it as smooth as they possibly can, because otherwise it will never run. Right?
Yeah, definitely. It's aligned from the start, and because if sales aren't bought in, they're not going to work the opportunities that are created in the best way possible. So you're not going to get ROI anyway. But sales have to be patient. Like the whole organization has to be patient. It's not right, switch it on. Right, where are these? Like, it's not that kind of, in B2B, that kind of campaign doesn't really exist anymore. Like, even if you do directly outreach to someone and they respond, the chances are it's because they have been influenced in loads and loads of other areas. There is not like direct marketing as it used to be, where it was just one like linear focus on that customer and that got the deal. Does not happen anymore. There's all of this other stuff going on that's influencing them, and eventually there's one thing that tips them over the edge. And that's what we have to think about with ABM. It's like the whole picture.
I agree. I completely agree. I think that we've been chatting for quite a while.
It was good.
A little bit more.
Interesting,
Time flies, I have to say.
Yeah.
Time flies. So before we wrap up, I think that I would like to get perhaps some thoughts out of you in terms of what do you think is the future for ABM? And what would you tell someone that doesn't know about ABM? It's a B2B, but doesn't know about this kind of campaigns. What would you tell them? And how would you encourage them to get started, where they would have to look at?
Yeah. So I would say, obviously, it's the right, okay, it's the work that you do on identifying the accounts is the most important thing you can do, and do not scrimp on that. Like, do not go, right, we're going to target manufacturing, or we're going to target, that's not ABM. It's like, and this is where, for me, I think marketers can really seal their position on the board, because they can go to like the president, the CEO, the sales team, and say, like, who are we really keeping? Who are our best customers? Right, let's go find some more that look like that. These customers look like that. Right, where are they? What are they doing? What are their challenges? If you do that piece of work first, the rest of it becomes a lot easier. When you do that piece of work, you can also then start to agree how you're going to measure success. And measuring success is not going to be, we run this campaign, we got this many leads and this much pipeline, and it was 3 months. Like we don't, you know, back when I was running an agency, you know, a 3-month ABM campaign was not an ABM campaign. You don't run it for 3 months. It's always on, like, until you've converted that prospect. And I think it would be, do your research, agree what your measurements are along the way, so you can have confidence. Like, it can start off with engagement, like, are we getting clicks? Are we seeing the brands that we know are valuable to us actually consuming what we're giving them? And then you can start to go further and nurture them through the funnel. But if you get some more simple metrics to start off with, everyone can feel good about what you're doing, and it's not wasted. And yeah, then it will allow you to be patient. Like, don't give up, basically. Yeah. Don't give up too soon.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I read some stats the other day, actually, Kirsty and I was speaking about this, that in 2015, which was when I was first starting out in this industry, actually, when I first met Kirsty around that sort of time. And at that time, I think it was really, really low, something about 10 to 15% of B2B marketeers were doing ABM. In fast forward to 2025, you know, 10 years later, something astronomical, like 95 to 99% of B2B marketers are adopting ABM. And so those that aren't very adverse to ABM and those that aren't very well educated on it, like, get yourself out there, like, get to know, because the times are changing.
And it's not just for tech brands and SaaS brands, it's for every organization.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, guys, thank you very much for coming. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you.
We got a
Lovely
lot of
conversation.
insights, and looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah,
Good.
brilliant.
Amazing.
Thanks,
Dan,
guys.